What's up, guys? Can you hear me? All 7 of you. Appreciate you guys are here. Let's see. Send me a message on here in chat if you can or can't hear. The bit rate's a little low, but we'll roll with it and figure things out as we go. So basically, I wanted to talk to you guys about acceleration technique, acceleration mechanics. I've been working on a couple videos related to the topic, but I think we could just have this kind of discussion. I can basically go over what I was going to go over in the video anyways. You can watch this back if you want, but if you guys have questions, you can bring them up. Don't expect this to be too long, but we will see how it goes. No expectations. Got some people rolling in. Audio's good. Thank you, guys. All right. So with acceleration, I think, like I talked about in my previous video about using your legs like hammers at top speed, where you want to get into a nice upright posture. You want to let those legs get to the front side, swinging out in front, and then whipping it back under your body. We want to take this same type of approach and apply it to acceleration, but it requires that you have both the posture set up correctly, meaning your torso, your pelvic tilt, that has to be set up properly. And you have to also combine that with the front side leg action that we see, say, in the top speed video that I made, where you are getting that whip from the hip, you are swinging that leg to the front side before whipping it back under you. But in acceleration, this is it's a lot harder to do because we need to combine that with a forward tilt of the torso and a neutral pelvis. There's kind of 3 archetypes of poor acceleration technique that I see very commonly. One is the stabber, and this is the person who, when they come out of the blocks, they're just stabbing behind them. Their shin is just digging into the ground at a nice, downward, backward angle, but they never get out of that, really. They try to stab the ground the whole way. They usually will get stuck to where they never quite open up and never feel like they can really run their true maximal velocity, because really they're stuck in a type of sprinting that you only see in elite sprinters in the first 10 meters or so. So we have the stabber. Then we also have the reacher, and the reacher is someone who, they know how to get their leg to the front side, but all they do is they get it to the front side and they leave it there, crashing into the ground way out in front of them, exposing themselves to hamstring risk. If you've been to a bunch of high school meets, you've probably seen this all the time. The problem there is that not only are we risking injury, we're crashing into the ground, so we're slowing down each step. We're not in a good position to apply force. You're also going to be on the ground longer because when you reach out and grab the ground in front of you, generally that leads to you over pushing and being on the ground a long time, excessive backside mechanics, and that screws you up as well. Then we have the leaner, and the leaner is someone who they get their torso forward, but they also have their legs behind them. So it's not like they just have their torso forward, their legs are under them, and they're able to strike the ground right under their body. They lean forward, but they do this at the expense of frontside mechanics. So they lean forward from the ground up the whole way, and they get that backside high leg kick behind them, which leads to their foot just crashing into the ground when they hit the ground. So, let's see. Got a couple comments here real quick. Yeah, Ethan, that is probably played a role in that injury. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. We see that there are these aspects of these poor archetypes of acceleration technique that apply to good sprinting. So it's not that if you're doing any one of these things, you're doing something that is inherently bad. It's just maybe that one thing that you are good at needs to be brought into the rest of your overall, approach to sprinting and combined with a few other things that will help you ultimately run as fast as possible. So just to recap real quick, we have the stabber who they really know how to dig that shin into the ground for that first step, but then they keep doing that. We have the reacher who reaches out in front of the body, stays on the ground a long time, pushes behind them. And then we have the leaner who is constantly falling throughout the whole race, a lot of backside mechanics. how do we combine this into one cohesive strategy to run fast? That's the real question here, right? Well, what you do is, first of all, we have to have a neutral pelvis. You have to have a forward tilt of the torso, and you have to be able to get your legs to the front side while maintaining that forward tilt from basically the hips up, or that forward torso position that we're talking about. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean here. Let's see. Bring this up. All right. I'm going to hide myself for a second. So here we have Mike Rogers. I think most of us know who Mike Rogers is, but if not, he's a really successful American sprinter. He's going to come out of the blocks here. He's just wearing regular shoes. I have it slowed down. Okay, so you see right here. Oops. Too far. All right. Sorry about this. Right here, you see his shin. Okay. His shin is about to stab back into the ground. That's what I call a stabbing motion. That's great. He does that there. He does that there. If you are the stabber, you're going to keep doing this, and it's just not that beneficial for you. What we want to see is, yes, you come out of the blocks or you come out of your stance and you stab the ground for those couple steps, kind of pushing steps, we could call them also. But then you want to see opening up. So you see his knee is now opening up while it's in the air, but he gets it back under him. So opens up, but is it going to strike in front of him or is it going to strike right under him? That looks like it's striking under him, right? It's still even like a millimeter off the ground, so his center of mass is going to move forward just a little bit. Now he's in a very good position to push. So, and I don't just mean push behind you, but push. I'm just going to say push because it's an easy word to use. Don't like take it to heart too much or focus on the word itself too much. But he is exhibiting exactly what we're talking about. He has the forward-oriented torso. He has a neutral pelvis. And he's getting very noticeably front side with his mechanics on that front leg, right? Look how open this leg is. His knee is more open than 90 degrees. But unlike the reacher, he brings it back to the ground under him so then that he can apply force to the ground and, be effective. So let's watch this again. Comes out, stab, stab. Now he starts to open up, right? But he's still maintaining this forward torso, neutral pelvis, and then he's getting that whip it forward and whip it back under him type of leg action on the front side. So there's a couple things that I think are worth pointing out here. The thing is with this type of positioning here that we see, when we combine the forward tilt to the torso and we get the front side leg action going on, there's a couple benefits that I think are really important, but unless you have the proper hamstring strength, unless you have the awareness of your body to feel where you are in space and to sense what is too much, what is not enough as far as your body's overall positioning, how far you're letting that leg open up and all that. Aside from, specifics that are relevant to each individual person, there's a couple benefits that we're going to see from this type of combination of posture and leg action. The forward tilt of the torso, since your hamstrings are attached to the knee and the hip, and since your pelvis, where your hips are attached to your back, as you tilt your torso, you're going to get increased tension, you're going to get increased lengthening on your hamstrings. Because of the length-tension relationship, as you lengthen them, there's going to be more tension. And when there's more tension, you have more potential to provide a nice forceful strike into the ground if you let that leg open up and then reverse back in, a good way. So the forward tilt of the torso is going to help create more tension in the hamstrings, the upper calves, the glutes, and this is going to help us generate more force and attack the ground aggressively. But it's not just that this position helps us produce more tension in the hamstrings, the glutes, upper calves, and all that. It's also that you're going to be in a good position from a leverage standpoint to attack the ground, and then once you're on the ground, to launch yourself off of it. If you think of the reacher and you think, you look here at, let's see, right here. If you look at Mike Rogers, right, his foot is basically under his center of mass. His center of mass is going to be somewhere right here. Oh, there we are. Like kind of right there. That's where his center of mass is approximately. He's striking right under his center of mass. If he were to be in front of himself, grabbing the ground out in front, because he's a reacher, where he can get the leg to the front side, but he contacts too far in front of the body, he's going to be pulling, and that's disadvantageous. We are not built to pull very well. We're built to, propel ourselves off the ground with our center of mass pretty much right over the foot. Based on how we're built, that's just what works for us as humans. If he were to reach out, grab the ground in front, and try to pull, he's not going to be able to be very effective with applying the force. Doesn't matter how forceful he is, potentially, how much force he could potentially put out. If it's not applied in the right direction, and it's not applied relative to the center of mass in a position or a point on the ground that is beneficial from a leverage standpoint, then it's kind of a waste. He's not going to get the most out of it. But here, he's able to do that. Why? Because he's combining the forward tilt of the torso with the frontside leg action. The torso helps orient your body in a way that allows you to strike right on top of yourself, I like to call it, or right under your center of mass, while also getting the benefit of that increased tension on the hamstrings, glutes, calves, all that stuff that I just talked about a minute ago. Combining those two things is a really potent, combination for improving your acceleration. Now, like I said a little while ago, you do have to make sure that your hamstrings are strong enough, that they are, mobile enough that you can open up, because maybe you've done eccentric hamstring strength training, maybe you've done some good stuff like that. You have to be able to let that hamstring open up before you can whip it back under yourself. So, you need to keep in mind, if you're just going to go out to the track later this afternoon and try this stuff, start, be kind of careful, because if you haven't done any eccentric strength training, this might shock your hamstrings a bit. But I think this brings up an important point, that while one might say, okay, you're increasing tension in the hamstrings, you might be increasing the likelihood of getting injured because of that. Okay, yeah, that's one way to look at it. The way I look at it is that across the board, there are a lot of very good sprinters who are doing this, and therefore that tells me their ability to get into this position and combine that with opening up on the front side and getting that tension in the leg on the front side, the ability to combine posture with tension is important, and it is probably something that helps, determine who can run fast and who can't. We have people who they could get on the front side, but they can't do that with a lean. Or we have other people who can lean, but they can't combine that with front side mechanics. So yes, we need to be conscious of the fact that maybe we're in a position that exposes us to greater risk of injury, but usually the greater the risk of injury is, as long as your technique is good and you're not contacting out in front of the body, that's, sort of related to performing well. If we think about what performing well is in sprinting, it's moving very fast, producing a lot of force, and when you move very fast and produce a lot of force, you're increasing the risk of injury. So, I think pretty much anybody could go out and do this as long as they're well trained already as a sprinter. But I think it's worth mentioning, you got to have the hamstring strength training on point to allow for you to do this. You have to have some mobility work in there, so that way when you go out and do this, your body is physically prepared, and then you can benefit from this approach. I'll check in on the chat real quick. All right, I'll look through this a little later. Definitely work chest in the gym. That's all you need to do to run faster. By which point should shin angle be vertical? I would say, well, if we look at this video, it's probably going to be around step 7. Step 7 is generally where 10 meters is. So if we look, all right, I think this is step 6 for him. We can look though. Now his shin is vertical. I would say around the 10 meter mark is a good time to, focus on approximately where you want to have your shin vertical. If your shin is vertical on step 2, that's probably way too early. If your shin is oriented in a forward angle at 30 meters, that's also a problem. 10 meters is a good place to work on getting that shin vertical. But notice, here his shin is vertical, but where is his torso? His torso is still oriented forward, right? And that's another important point. We want to let the legs get into more of a top end speed, maximal velocity mechanics type of motion earlier, and then let the torso rise last. What's up, kitty? Sorry if some cats interrupt our stream here. But you know, you don't want to just rush into getting into upright sprinting. You don't want to hold yourself back either. Let the legs do their thing, and then you can let your torso rise as sort of the last thing. It's not that you need to just stay low for 50 meters or something like that, but it's a gradual progression, and I would let the legs open up first and then finish off with the torso being the last thing to come fully upright, or 99% upright. Now I think we all know the GOAT, Maurice Greene, right? So we're going to look at him. All right. I know it looks weird because I'm looking the opposite direction, but whatever. All right, so here we have Maurice Greene. This is when he ran his world record. And I think what you're going to notice is that pretty much we're going to see the same stuff. We're going to see the same type of action. And this is actually the video where I first really recognized, like, whoa, wait a second. The whole keep the knee closed, stab, keep that shin angle, digging back into the ground for as long as you can. This is the video that told me that's a bunch of bullshit, I don't mean to say that, you should never try to keep that low shin angle, or that you should never be doing that stabbing motion. That's what you do in the first few steps, maybe up to step 5, 6, something like that. But let's just watch and see, This man did pretty well, so let's see what he does. All right, it is slow motion, but one might say false start, but hey, let's leave that to history. So, got a nice stabbing motion on that first one, low shin angle, that's all good, and we all know about that stuff. But look, all right, he's starting to open up already. The knee on the front side is showing a little bit of an opening of that angle, but his torso is very forward. Now notice, here, he is exhibiting pretty much a straight line from his foot up through his shoulders. The guy to his left, not so much. But as we go, I think what you'll see is this front knee is going to open up more. That shin is going to be vertical while in the air. It won't quite be vertical yet when it hits the ground. But he's got that forward torso opening up on the front side. Forward torso, pole in the way, but ooh, that was a good one. See that? Opened up. Opened up. He's still got a forward lean of the torso, but his legs are moving into that more maximal velocity sprinting mechanics type of motion that I mentioned, while maintaining this forward torso. He's pretty much, if you watch his legs, he looks like someone sprinting at max velocity, but he's still got that forward pressure, forward lean from the hips up. Now he starts to move upright, and pretty much the race is over from here on. He just destroys everybody and makes them look like children as he runs a world record that took a very long time to be broken. Now, this is what we were talking about in that other video. Really opening up, really whipping from the hip, and that is that. That's how he made history. Let's watch it in full speed. Sound good? I guess it's slow motion still, but full slow motion, we'll call it. Opening up, opening up. Now he's upright. Let's watch it again. Opening up, opening up. His legs are opening up. Now he lets his torso rise as the last thing. Still, he's still got a very slight, very subtle forward-oriented torso. So, you don't need to be fully upright, because oftentimes when you're fully upright, you might be leaning back, or you might just be totally vertical. And when you combine how your legs are moving with your torso, if you get too upright, sometimes it can cause problems to where you're doing like the marching band kick out in front of the body too much, and not being able to use it effectively. But pretty much he gets upright, finishes the race. One last time. Comes out of the block, stab, stab, right? Stab. This is the stabbing motion, nice rigid ankle, closed knee angle. Side note, the first step of the sprint out of the blocks is sort of unique. We could call this a transition step. This is the step where the knee joint contributes the most relative to any other step in which the knee joint contributes. Obviously, the knee joint contributes to every step. But the first step is where it contributes the most to what? To horizontal velocity, horizontal propulsion. This first step is where the knee joint, and therefore the quads, is doing the most work it'll ever do to propel you forward. The rest of the time, it pretty much just propels you up and generates vertical velocity and vertical displacement. So if your first step out of the block sucks, you probably have weak knees. Now he's really opening up. I mean, look at that. You can see in his hamstrings, his adductors, even that there's sort of like a little dark triangle just behind his knee. That's the hamstrings, the adductors below it, and then sort of wrapping above it and to the side is the quad, wrapping down into the calves. You can see how much even though this is a grainy, old-ass video, he's generating a lot of tension here. That's why it looks like the way it does. He's opening up, but he doesn't just open up and leave it there. What does he do? Boom, he gets it back under him, right? Just like that. He maintains that upright velocity, or that maximal velocity, upright mechanics type of leg action as his torso rises, and he finishes the race and wins. So, I really, that's the wrong one. All right. So I think, even though this may seem pretty simple, this may seem like pretty basic stuff, it's something that you have to consider, and you have to think about how you might be able to bring this into your own training, into your own workouts, and when you're looking at your technique on film, when you're, sitting between reps, or when you go home after practice and you look at what you did that day, this is something that you can, kind of default to when you're looking at your acceleration sprints and think, okay, where was my torso? Was my pelvis tilted forward, back, or was it neutral? Was I getting front side, or was I just stuck behind myself? And if you just look at that kind of combination of the posture of the torso, the pelvis, and the front side leg action, if you see that stuff, you can be pretty sure that overall you're probably doing all right. You don't have to overstress yourself and overthink it. As long as you check these boxes, you should be good to go. I'm going to check into the chat here. The entire 60-meter Maurice sprinting, his knee was never 90 degree, except for that first stab step. I would say it probably was at 90. Why do coaches keep talking about high knees and 90 degrees at max speed? That's because people follow the herd. And if you follow me on Twitter, you might see me, ranting about that stuff. It's because people follow the herd. They see things or they hear things that might make sense in a certain way, or if you, leave out certain information or you look at it in a certain light, it might make sense. Or if you say you're watching someone sprinting at like a full speed video and you see them sprinting, sometimes it does look like their knee gets really high. Sometimes it does look like they have this 90-degree angle, every step of the way. But when you slow it down and you look at it at a slow motion, it's easier to see that really that's just not the case. And the fastest sprinters, pretty much across the board, are letting that foot float out in front of them before whipping it back under them. I think the other thing is that a lot of coaches are coaching people who aren't that good, and most people who aren't that good can keep their knee angle closed at 90 degrees. They can stab back into the ground. So that's something that coaches will default to because it works for a lot of people when they're novices or they just are new to sprinting. See, nice, Mason. You're on top of it because those are easy cues for them to remember. See, I didn't even notice that. Nice. Hamish or Hamish, I'm glad you're into training and sprinting and loving it, man. That's what it's all about, A lot of people will be like, oh, how do I, get better? How do I run this time or all that stuff? And it's like, I get it. I've been there. For a long time, I had I remember when I was in community college, the record was 1074, I think, at Santa Barbara City College, and I wanted to break that record. So I screenshotted 1074 from like a clock and put it on my phone so that I could see it every day. I broke it, but I broke it the year after I left and went to another school, so who knows how much it helped. But so I know what it's like to focus on times. I just think it's important to take a step back, focus on enjoying what you do, because then no matter what, you'll have fun. And also when you're having fun or you're just open to enjoying what you're doing, I think it makes you a little bit more open to adapting to the training that you're doing, because you'll be a little bit more open-minded, you'll be positive, you might have better, chemicals flowing through your brain and your body, not all stressed out, worried about how you're going to do. Oh, am I going to run as fast as I want to run? You don't need all that stuff. Just enjoy what you're doing. Like someday we're all going to be dead, so then we're not going to be able to sprint. So we got to enjoy what we're doing while we're here. How high should arm swing be within the acceleration phase? That's a tough one. I would say, if your shoulders are really restricted to where you can't get your arm up to almost parallel to the ground, you should probably work on some shoulder mobility. I think I could work on that personally. I like to see my hands on the front side, but lately I haven't even really been paying attention to it. I've just been throwing my elbows up, if anything, and letting the arms go. I've been paying more attention to positioning, leg action, and letting the arms do their thing. One thing that will help though when you're doing this, when you're getting this forward torso position and that front side leg mechanics, is sort of like if you were to like beat the drum right in front of your chest down to where you're about to strike with your foot, if you sort of time your arm swing downward with that foot strike toward the same point on the ground, I think it does make this easier to maintain this sort of technique we're talking about. I wouldn't say that it feels like you're pulling yourself forward. I would, it's tough because some people are going to interpret movements in different ways and it'll feel different depending on the person. I would say you want to feel yourself pulling your foot up off the ground and compressing that leg up. Like if you imagine your leg is a big spring and you can lengthen it to the ground, but you can also compress it up. You want to pick up your foot off the ground and just let that happen. And I think that can help your maximal velocity sprinting and your acceleration. Might not help your very first step, but once you're sort of upright, just pick that foot up, because the more you compress that spring, or the more you compress and shorten that lever of your leg, the quicker your legs will cycle. You'll have better stride frequency. It'll be easier to move your leg, so you'll use less energy. And I think it'll help, just help your sprint overall if you work on getting that heel recovery high and tight under the body versus keeping your legs long like you're doing a straight leg bound the whole way. David, feel free to post the link if you want. It's good leg recovery drills, psych your legs correctly. I don't know. I mean, I like to do dribbles, but it really comes down to like just focusing on what the actual action is of picking your foot up and then experimenting with that, whether you're doing drills, whether you're sprinting, focusing on picking the foot up and making it quick and easy rather than aggressive and, like you're trying to deadlift a truck. It shouldn't feel like that. It should feel like a little blip of energy, but it shouldn't feel too intense or too hard. It should just be a little pop off the ground. Is 1.1 for a 10-meter fly, Ethan? Is that what you're talking about? Because you can definitely improve it. I mean, it just takes time. I've noticed that there's like months that'll go on where I don't see any improvement in my times, and then boom, all of a sudden everything clicks and I drop some huge PRs in the 30-meter fly, or maybe it's a 30-meter block start, or whatever the given distance is. But the PRs, they come and they go, and they aren't always very consistent, or at least they don't always appear very consistent. And that's why I said earlier, we got to focus on enjoying what we're doing, because most of the time we're not seeing those times that we want to see. It's very fleeting, those moments where we see improvement. So if you're positive, enjoying what you're doing, you don't have to be out there like a hippie, like loving everybody, but at the same time, don't get too stressed out or put too much weight on your back mentally by setting expectations that are, too aggressive or anything like that. It messes with people's heads and makes them not have any fun. Yeah, I think you should get your calf close to your hamstring for sure. Because think about it. If you have like a long lever, like if you had some really long stick, or say you were playing baseball and you had a really long bat and you tried to swing that bat, well, the longer it is, the harder it is to swing. And the same thing can be said for your leg. If your leg is too long, then it's probably, I don't mean long just like your actual leg length, but if while you're cycling your leg through in the air during the swing phase, if your leg is too long during the swing phase, it's going to take a lot more force and energy and effort to get that leg swinging through. It's going to take longer, most likely, and I think it stresses out the muscles around the hip too much, to where the adductors, the groin, psoas, all that stuff is more likely to get hurt if we keep the leg long when you're trying to cycle that leg through during the swing phase. Let's see, should get to 0.95, but I'm not sure if my mechanics are on point because I've been doing this high knee and 90 degree to the chest. Yeah, I just, each day focus on trying to maybe work on one thing. Maybe it's getting tall and letting your legs open up on the front side. Maybe it's working that torso position. You don't have to work on having too much of the front side mechanics and acceleration your first day out there when you're working on this, but just experiment with it a little bit and trust that over the course of weeks and months, you will see an appreciable improvement. And if you improve your acceleration because you're no longer trying to just stab or just trying to reach, and you get into this type of, movement that we talked about earlier, then I think you'll probably see those flying times improve as well, because if your acceleration is weak, it's probably going to be harder to hit the top speed times that you want. See, I'm going to scroll up in the chat real quick because I wasn't looking at it for a while. Step 7, the pro athlete in the video is doing what most coaches say is not good, bending at the waist. I see that also in many pro sprinters, so I am guessing the coaches are wrong. Yes, the coaches are wrong because, once again, they hear something or they see something and they repeat it because people subconsciously like to be a part of the herd. And so they will gravitate toward repeating something they've heard rather than digging into it and looking at it themselves in great detail. This is why when you look around at the world and you see all kinds of weird, crazy ass shit going on, and you think to yourself, how is this even a thing? It's the herd mentality. So I think the other thing is that people don't want to get their athletes injured. And like I also said earlier, if you're getting into these very open front side mechanics, yes, you are exposing yourself to greater injury risk in the hamstrings. But at the same time, this is like the gatekeeper to performance. So you have to expose yourself to risk. Just like when I trade Bitcoin, I can't expose myself to zero risk and expect to make any money. Yeah, I might lose my ass and, lose all my money. I might go out to the track, try to do this, tear my hamstring, and I'm done. But if you're intelligent with the way you approach it, you incrementally progress things, you combine the progression of your sprinting with some hamstring strength training work, then you can expose yourself to these, slightly different movements than maybe what you've been used to, but not be at risk of injury. And I think that injury risk is one of the reasons why coaches don't tell their athletes to open up on the front side, because maybe they've dealt with a lot of reachers who they reach, they open up, but they never whip it back under them, and they associate reaching in the air and then just letting it crash to the ground. They associate that with opening up the leg, whereas opening up the leg can occur in a good way, where you open it up but then whip it back under the body, or it can happen poorly, where you open it up, leave it there, crash into the ground, and look like garbage. Let's see. Just scrolling up through the chat here. Come from a football 40-yard dash background, never had any track training. But would a stabber indicate someone who takes more steps in the acceleration than they should? Probably. If you're stabbing, one of the reasons why the stabbing approach does not work for the whole duration of the sprint is because as you sprint, as you accelerate, each step your body Puff, shut up, dude. Sorry. As you increase your velocity, it is harder to continue to increase your velocity, right? If say you're pushing a shot put, as you push that shot put through the air, it's accelerating, and you're trying to keep up with it as you try to push it more and more and more. So eventually it gets to the point where it accelerates away from you, and you can't keep up with it and still apply force. Because to apply force, since force and velocity are generally inverse, they have an inverse relationship with one another, the faster something moves, the harder it is for you to apply force to it. As you continue to increase your speed horizontally down the track, and if you're just trying to stab, it's not an effective mechanism or an effective strategy, I should say. It's not an effective strategy to continue to accelerate to high velocities. It works for a while, and that's why people get away with it when they're slower. That's why they get away with it during the first, maybe 20 meters. But at a certain point, you can no longer apply the amount of force you need to apply at the speed or velocity you need to apply it, and be able to do that with the stabbing motion. Scrolling up a little bit more. Forget about sprinting at 220. Yeah, that's going to be rough, man. I mean, I know a couple people who, like Dwayne Chambers, he sprinted at, I think, 205. But, different situation. It's best for sprinters to have a more upright position when accelerating so that their feet can go under their center of mass. We want to have the torso forward, the legs on the front side, kind of neutral in general. They're getting front and back side, but you want to have that torso forward, legs getting front side, and then contacting under the body, and that forward torso tilt is going to assist that. That was Anthony Hall's question. Let's see if there's any new ones down here. Should I work out my core more than my chest at gym for speed? Probably. How key are hip adductors and abductors in sprinting? What are they doing? Well, the adductors are really important. The adductors both flex the hip and extend the hip. They also obviously adduct the hip. That's why they're called adductors. But they do all kinds of stuff. And I think one reason why they get injured a lot is because they have a very complex job. Depending on the position of your leg, the adductors can flex the hip or they can extend the hip. So if there's some poor, coordination in there between the muscle fibers themselves, which you can improve that with eccentric strength training a little bit, or if just, they're not that strong, or maybe they're strong but they aren't strong at the right length in the right position, that could cause problems as well. You don't need to be out there just doing the old K-bands, knee lifts all day, every day, but at the same time, you should be definitely exposing your adductors to a wide range of positions, different loads, different velocities, and that's some of the stuff that I've included in my 60-meter programs this year, is focusing a lot more on the adductors. Should you fully extend every step or just focus on hitting powerfully? I don't worry about full extension. Why? Here's why. If you are focusing on full extension of the leg, right? By the time that you've felt yourself fully extend the leg into the ground, and then that sensory, information has come back to your brain and you've been able to consciously register that information, by the time that's happened, the moment for you to fully extend the leg has passed. So I wouldn't worry about that. I would just, like I said earlier, once you feel the ground, pick your foot back up, get it up, nice high and tight to your hamstring, compress that leg up, get it to the front side, and just keep sprinting. Don't worry about pushing for too long. I think people get caught up in trying to push their way down the track, and they end up getting skewed to like that leaner that we talked about, where they're just, it's hard to do. All right, there we go. So they just kind of stay like that. Their leg mechanics are really backside back here, and they just kind of fall their way down the track because they're trying to push. I wouldn't do that. I've done it. Didn't work. How does whipping it back under your feet feel, or how does it whip back? Think of it as forward, backward. Or, the other way to do it, which I think is a little easier, is as you drive your leg up, you just let that foot relax, and then you drive your leg back down and let that leg come back down with it. Like if you focus mentally on the knee or the thigh, up and down with the knee and the thigh, and you let that foot, the hamstrings relax, calf relax a little bit, and you let that foot swing out, you'll kind of start to get it. But it's hard to teach and it's hard to get. So we'll probably continue to talk about it for many videos because it's not that easy. Yeah, the cats do want to know how to run fast. I had to learn the hard way. I pulled my hamstrings twice because I was strengthening. Yeah. Ooh. The lights are flickering because we have thunderstorms rolling in. If I mysteriously disappear, you know why. Didn't know how important hamstring strength was. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people, they don't quite consider all of the roles that something may play, or they just haven't been exposed to the information in the right way. So don't feel bad if you neglected your hamstrings. I neglected my hamstrings for a really long time, and that's why I now, proselytize to you guys about how important they are. It took me injuring my hamstrings repeatedly to start to think, something's going on here and I need to deal with it. The interesting thing is that after I made my hamstrings bulletproof, my hip flexors started to get hurt. So then I started to think, all right, well, the hamstrings are definitely important, but they aren't the only thing that's important. What is important is having a balance between, all the different actions of the legs, all the different muscles that are involved in the body, and training in a way that allows us to make sure the hamstrings don't overpower the hip flexors and vice versa. So I think, personally, when we approach hip flexor training, we don't need to necessarily work on the loads to be quite as high as we do in the hamstrings because they serve different roles. The hip flexors are swinging the leg through the air when there's not a lot of load on it. They need to be more capable from a velocity standpoint. They need to be able to hit these extreme ranges of motion. And so I would focus your hip flexor training on, yes, being able to open it up on the backside. Yes, being able to get it to drive up effectively on the front side. But you don't need to max out on your hip flexor training work. I don't think it's necessary. Do you know how to improve balance while running? Strength. The stronger you are, the better your balance will be. Strength is one of the most fundamental capabilities across the board. I don't mean strength as in powerlifting where you're deadlifting 800 pounds or something like that and your veins are bulging out of your head and your eyes are going to explode. But basic strength, fundamental general strength, when you look at someone who's an elderly person, for example, they have poor balance, right? Well, why do they have poor balance? Because their legs, the connections between their brain and their legs, their core, they aren't strong enough, and therefore the muscles struggle to coordinate and they look all floppy like they're going to fall over. So if you struggle with balance, I would really focus on general strength. So you could do body weight strength work, get up onto a high box, do a step up, and just keep doing step ups on a really high box. You don't need any load if balance is your issue. Over time, you'll find that, okay, this is getting easy and you can add load or make the exercises more complex. But if you have issues with balance, get stronger. How high should my knee go when in full speed? A little bit below parallel. The trigger warning at the top of your... Yeah. If anybody goes onto my Twitter, don't judge me too hard because half the time I'm either semi-joking or trying to point something out in a specific way. So don't take anything I say there too seriously, but hopefully you can laugh about it. And sometimes I just do things because I want people to either, if they are going to get pissed off about something I say, I want them to maybe have a moment to reflect and think, maybe I didn't need to get pissed off. And that can be, what I'm giving to them. But yeah, Twitter's a burning pile of garbage overall. Would single leg box jumps help acceleration? I mean, I think they do. I think they're going to help from a general coordinative standpoint. I think they're going to help learning how to apply power to the ground, power that you are already capable of producing, but you haven't quite developed it fully. In and of themselves, will they do that much? I don't know, but I think that they're worth doing. Because, for example, when we talk about cycling the leg through and picking that heel up high, compressing that leg, when you do a single leg box jump, say you're walking into it and then you, boom, jump, cycle through, and then land, you're working on that cycle of the leg. and I think that's a great opportunity to work on heel recovery. So it's worth doing, and it'll probably be useful. Yeah. Feels like my legs collapse into the ground on the first few steps during acceleration. I'm not able to strike the ground and use the force from the ground efficiently. Probably weak knees, yeah. It could definitely be where you're hitting the ground and your rhythm, and when you pull your foot off the ground is going to dictate where you're able to set it down on that following stride. So there could be a whole wide-ranging different number of factors, but generally if your legs are collapsing, especially during the first few steps, if you scroll back earlier in the video when I was looking at Maurice Greene during his very first step of the sprint, I talked about how the knees are most important during that first step for producing some horizontal velocity. I think if you're not strong enough at the knee joint, just in general, it's going to make it hard for you to, hit the ground and stay rigid and not just collapse into the ground. So Xavier, I think, working on things like step-ups on low boxes, high boxes. I posted something on my Instagram story last night of a lunge where basically I step forward onto a box with my front leg and then I do a step up from there. That type of stuff is probably going to be very good for you. Split squats, back squats, anything like that, probably good. Do you pull the arms at the first 7 steps so far back that you feel they are pushing your body, assisting your feet? When I do that, compared to pulling the front arm up, it feels slower. I don't like having the arms too far back because it feels almost like drag. Like there's another concept that I haven't spoken about in a video yet, but if you think about your legs are rotating, right? Kind of in a forward rotation. Your body, to stay in equilibrium, has to have some counteracting force from that. And so I think sometimes the arms can help counteract. Say, if you're really aggressive with cycling your legs, that forward cycle, well, sometimes it can help to counteract that with a forward upward arm swing, and it can help you maintain more of an equilibrium in your overall posture. So you could try that. I don't personally like throwing the arms too far back. I'd rather just throw them down at the ground or kind of up and getting them sort of in my field of view. I focus more up and down with the arms. The other thing you could do is just throw the elbows. So if you just throw your elbows up, that can be useful too, because if you throw your elbow up, you're not throwing your hand back and getting that really long lever arm swing, which is going to be hard to pull back through unless you got some really strong elastic biceps and pec tendon. So if you're struggling with the arm swing, just throw the elbow up, and that'll keep your arm closed, but not because you're trying to keep it closed and run like a robot. It will just do that naturally. If you watch someone like Usain Bolt, he keeps his arm pretty closed on the backside. If you watch from different angles, you'll see it. I don't think he's like thinking in his head, I got to keep a 90-degree angle because this study said, bleh. He's just doing it naturally. But I think he achieves that by getting elbows up, arms up, something like that, instead of arms forward and back, because arms forward and back causes you to open up. Carl Lewis also uses the cue arms up, feet down. He did pretty well, so it's probably not a bad cue. Come here, kitty. I know you're gonna get all mad, so why don't you come over here? How do I program? It is a burning pile of garbage. How do I program weight training? This is Puffs, by the way. How do I program weight training for sprinting? You could check out, I got some videos on that. I got some programs out there you could buy too, but like I talked about earlier, do some split squats, do some high box step-ups, some low box step-ups. All those different, more general exercises, as long as you progress them over time, will be quite effective. And I don't think you need to get too complicated with any of your strength training for sprinting. Xavier, no problem. Glad to help. For college sprinters, when do you think sprint work should begin? Should athletes be sprinting in the preseason? Yeah, I think you should be sprinting from, pretty much September onward, but it varies. Like day one, you don't need to be on the track with the with the wind at your back, trying to run your fastest time ever. You could be on grass, going through the motions at 85%, just getting your body back into it. So when I say, yeah, you want to sprint from day one, take that into the context of if you just hopped off the couch and haven't been doing anything, you're going to have to ease back into the ranges of motion, ease back into the velocities that we achieve in sprinting, and that can take some time. So I like to default to like 70 meter, 80 meter runs where you're kind of easing into it, getting up tall, feel quick for a few strides, and then shut it down. That's a good way to introduce yourself back into sprinting. And then over time, you'll feel like, okay, I can go quicker, or okay, I'm bored of going on grass, I want to go on the track, and you can progress from there. But I did make an off-season training video recently, which I didn't know what to name it, but it's like 2 or 3 videos ago, but it's about off-season, pre-season training. I talk about that stuff, so I'd go check it out. Yeah, definitely try the elbow trick, man. I think it helps. About 1.75 meter sprinters, for example, Christian Coleman, 10 to 100 meter average frequency about 5.02, or Andre Carson 6.41. 10 to 60 frequency average 5.14. Trying to increase frequency with a metronome. I think there's a lot of like subtle magic out in the world that you can use to your advantage, and the metronome might be one of those things. You know, as the metronome is sort of ticking back and forth, maybe subconsciously you could register that, or it could placebo affect you into learning, or attaching yourself to that frequency, and maybe it would help you. I don't know that it would, but as far as frequency, I wouldn't look at an objective number and say I need to get this frequency. I would look more at what feels good when I'm sprinting, what looks good when I'm sprinting, and just seek that feeling. If you work on that heel recovery like I talked about earlier, picking up that foot, being nice and light and easy with that, just being relaxed when you pick that foot up, that'll help your frequency probably more than anything. Let's see. Yeah, he's a cute cat. He just likes to yell at the neighbors sometimes, but oh well. Keeps their life interesting, I guess. All right, how do sprinters become great finishers and develop such great speed endurance? I asked Dan Paff about Donovan Bailey. He was a great finisher. He did a lot of 70s, 90s, 110s, stuff in that range, really working close to the finish of the race. I like that work too. That's kind of my bread and butter, so I like the 70, 80, 90 to 110 range as speed endurance for a 100 meter or 60 meter dash sprinter. Who had the best drive phase and acceleration? Yeah, I think Maurice Greene, just like you said, it was smoother. It looked good. So it doesn't mean that he was faster every time, but I think if we were to look at an archetype of acceleration sprinting, Maurice Greene was on point. Real question is, who's faster, Cody or the cat? I tell you what, they're pretty quick when I get home and open the door and they're ready to ask for food. But then when I want them to move because I need to leave and I need to bring them back inside from the porch, they're not so fast. Mason, perfect response. What's your favorite speed endurance workout? Work to rest ratio. 4x70, 4x90, 6x70. I don't know, something in, like I said, that 70 to 110 range is like what I really like. But you can't simply, only do that. You have to include some of that longer special endurance work, especially as you're approaching competition. I think it's important. Puff, shut up, dude. When have you found the best amount of weeks is to the time to back off weight training? Some people will, I don't know. Val, to answer your question, there's like one other one I could probably bring up real quick if you guys want to see it. But real quick, I'm going to answer this question. Best amount of time or weeks to take off leading up to racing. I don't know. I think like a month out from your most important race, you should really start dialing back the lifting and only do things that you feel are going to, help you from a state of readiness standpoint or that help you stay confident in what you're doing. I wouldn't do anything that makes you sore within like 3 to 4 weeks of training. Thanks, Jack. Jack did a great job of dropping his time in 1 year by like 0.8 or 0.7. That was legit, man. Sorry I don't always check my Facebook messages anymore, but sometimes I'm hard to get a hold of, and if anyone's trying to get a hold of me at some time and I don't get back to you, I promise it's not personal. I have like 250 text messages I haven't read. I got like 1,000 phone calls. It's just, it's really quite ridiculous, I will say. But sorry. Who's my favorite sprinter? That's tough, man. I did like Maurice Greene, just his overall technique I thought was quality. Let's see. Tyson Gay was always nice to watch. He ran really fast. It was unfortunate that he had to get banned, but and it's extremely unfortunate that he lost his daughter. That was just terrible. But I like Donovan Bailey too, because he kind of he was unique. His start looked like, I don't even know what to call it. It was just like, whoa, dude, how'd you come up with that? But he still ran extremely fast. So I'd say Donovan Bailey's another good one. Does finishing the first, what do I think about overspeed training? I don't know. I think if you have a good way to do it, then yeah, it's probably worth doing. Sometimes I'll run with the wind in my back, and that's a good way to get a little bit of a boost. The towing tools, like the, what is it called? I'm forgetting right now, but tools that are towing you, they can be nice, but sometimes it's hard to coordinate that because you need someone to help you. You need a partner to do it. Obviously, the 1080 sprint would be great, but who in this chat has 20 grand to spend on a 1080 sprint? I know I don't. So maybe if I, took out a loan, then I could, but I don't know. Actually, that's something that I've been wanting to invent, is something that can tow you at the track, but is more mechanical and not just computerized, so it could be cheaper, so that people like us could buy it, bring it to the track, and you use it for overspeed. But I have yet to figure out how to do that. I have some ideas, but fortunately haven't been able to put that together yet. So if any engineers are out there, maybe we could work together. Does finishing the first 10 meters with 7.5, or 8 steps matter? Once again, that's one of those things where I think it's like the objective number of how many steps you take is not as important as how do those steps look? Do those steps look, high quality? Do they look like you're moving in a good way? Then whatever that number is that you see for your frequency is probably good. Someone just bought a program. Thanks. But I wouldn't say it has to be, 7 steps, 8 steps. Yeah, you probably want to err on the side of, going further each step, and therefore you would have less steps, but that depends on your body proportions, depends on how tired you are at that point in the race, where in the race you shine. A lot of factors go into that. What upper body exercises are useful? I don't do any anymore. When I was in high school, I got all intense about benching, and I benched 315 when I was 17 years old, 175 pounds. But now I have messed up shoulders. See, my AC joints are sticking out like a sore thumb. And now I have, some range of motion problems, stuff like that. So went a little too hard. Hey, what up, David? David Battisti, one of my best friends. Thank you for showing up. Upper body training, I'd say you could do some arm swing stuff like with a cable machine or bands. That might be worthwhile if you want to work on that. I think having an overall, you should be able to bench, but you don't need to bench all the time. So if you struggle with bench completely, yeah, maybe you could do some sets of 5 and add it to the end of your workout or something. But I wouldn't go crazy with the upper body training. I would do more things that are going to incorporate the upper body. Like, for example, when you do a squat, you're having to hold the bar on your back. Even though it's resting on you, you're still pressing up into it with your arms. Your core is working. Your upper back is working. You can use exercises that incorporate the arms, maybe a med ball throw or something, but you don't have to hyper focus on them, in and of themselves. Let's see. How much do you think age is a hindrance if the athlete is training properly? I just turned 28. Last year, I dropped my 60 meter PR was 691. I dropped it to 683 in like October or September, and then in April it dropped to 677. I think as long as your training, your rest, and all that is put together well, you can improve into your 30s for sure. But I'd be hitting some collagen with some vitamin C before and after your workouts. I'd be, whether it's foam rolling or some type of other recovery tool that you like to use, I'd focus on that stuff, because as you get older, you're not going to be able to hammer the 99% intensity work all the time, and you might have to manipulate your schedule to allow for you to do the work that you want to do, but maybe you need an extra day of rest, or maybe you need some more mobility work at night before you go to bed to allow you to do that. No worries about all the questions, by the way. Happy to answer them. Agree or disagree, the Bullet Bob Hayes had the best top-end speed? Yeah, I think he was definitely one of the fastest people ever, for sure. Like you say, is on a cinder track, and it's hard to compare things sometimes, but I guarantee if he was working today, he'd be balling out. Kip, when will my training book be available? So I got a block start book that I don't know if I should just turn it into just a pure book just completely on training in general, but I think it would be easier to release it as a block start book in and of itself. It's about 40 some odd pages long. So, first I'm trying to get out that 60 meter program, which I'll finish probably this week. Then my focus is going to be on how can I, get that book, produced as quick as possible, but still being quality. So I don't know how soon I'll have it out. I just don't want to put out something that sucks. And so sometimes that's why I delay on things, because I really like to mull it over in my head before I put it out there, because I feel like if I put something out to you guys and you spend money on it, you put time and energy into it, it needs to be something that I have like no hesitation about. Otherwise, I'd rather not even put it out. So it might take a little longer, but it's just because I want to put something out that is, quality. Let's see. Build muscle without weight training. Eat and sprint. That works. Body weight training is great too. You don't need weights. If you can access a gym, that'd be great, but you don't need them. You can get away with not having it if you do body weight training, you do some plyometrics, you do sprinting, sprint upstairs, use a sled, stuff like that can overcome when you don't have a gym to do strength training. Is powerlifting good for sprinting? I don't think it's bad in and of itself. It's just you have to consider when you're applying that powerlifting to your training program. Are you doing it in May when you have a competition in a week? That's probably not a good time to do it. In the summer when you're not competing, in the fall, that's when you can be doing pure strength training and likely not have any negative effect. It'll just help set you up for success later. Could you discuss ways to attempt to train max V when you're limited space? Oh, that's a good question. 40 meters. Well, that is tough, Mason. If you have someone who can pull you with a bungee to help your acceleration, that would definitely help. I think, you could rush your frequency a little bit and not be as patient in your acceleration, but I would be concerned that you might risk injury, because when you rush frequency too much, coordination gets off and things can get, strained more likely. The other thing is, I wouldn't want you to build a bad habit from a technical standpoint of trying to rush your acceleration. I do think you could work on things maybe that support max velocity sprinting. You can also do maybe on a block start day. I know this is going to sound counterintuitive, but maybe on a block start day, you just focus on like 15-meter block starts, being very quick. So you're working on that quickness. Another day, you can, assuming that you can sprint 40 meters and then decelerate, and there's not just a wall at 40 meters. 40-meter sprints are what helped me get to my first 60-meter PR of last year. So I think if you just do 40s, that's like perfect speed work, honestly. Now, if there's a wall at 40 meters, then yeah, gonna have some real trouble, and maybe it's time to get a motorless treadmill or something. Or you can fly out to somewhere like Arizona and have some more open space without snow. The other thing is, like, consider all the work that you can do outside of max velocity sprinting that is going to set you up so that when you're ready to go do max velocity sprinting because the weather permits it and you have the facilities to do it, then you're in a physical state that allows you to go do that effectively. So it may be that you have to hold off a little bit. Yeah, you could do your hard acceleration work or focus on high frequency in your acceleration work on some days just to keep that frequency input there. But you can be doing with your strength training, your progressions on the track, your plyometrics. You could be working double leg vertical stiffness with plyometrics, so that way when you're ready to go on the track and do your speed work, that quality is there. Or you've progressed your hamstring strength training to where now you're doing eccentric strength work but at a little bit higher of a velocity, so that way you're set up to be able to do max velocity sprinting and your hamstrings can handle it. I would start thinking in that way, how you can set yourself up for that time to be successful in the event that you really can't do anything right now. 16, you want to get better at the 200. Should I start going to the gym and do weight training? I mean, yeah, for sure, dude. Definitely. Just combine it with sprinting. Sprint some days, lift some days, sprint and lift some days if you want. At 16 years old, if your personal best is 25 some odd seconds, don't overthink it. Just put in work and have fun. Watch a lot of videos of people who are fast. Listen to these videos if they're interesting to you and they seem helpful. But just put in the work. Don't overthink it. No, you shouldn't go for mile-long runs probably every day. Probably should be doing some acceleration, good amount of intensive tempo, some speed work, some speed endurance work later in the year, things like that. In the gym, basic stuff, squats, split squats, sled pulls. Learn how to do a clean pull, stuff like that, and you will improve over time if you're 16 years old and that's your personal best. Yeah, I did run the 6.7. It was at practice, but I did it twice, so I think it sort of counts, right? It's with a free lap, and I set the timers at 0.8 meters past the line, and I try to do it all legit, so it's consistent. But it did feel good. I also ran 10.6 that day that I ran 6.7. So thank you. I do vitamin C and collagen, magnesium. Yeah, I like it, honestly, dude. I believe in it nowadays. Let's see. 42, using some of your YouTube vids. Went from 12 to 11.8. Pretty sure I can get more out of it. Yeah, I think you can, man. Whether you get my programs or not, I think you can improve more. We'll be looking into them. Appreciate it, man. Let's see. Yeah, rest and prehab as you get older is really key. Best solution for lack of space has been a skip-in start. Definitely true. Accelerating for about 20 to 25. Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to go, honestly. I can't quite visualize the exact space you have, but you could send me a picture of it or something on Instagram, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about that. Oh, yeah, looking down here now, you have a legit wall at 40 meters. Oh, dude, that sucks. I'm sorry. Sorry you have to deal with that. How do you prioritize your training? Days per week, sprinting at the track? Part of it's based off of my work schedule. So my day job is I sell exercise equipment. So my hours are kind of long, I would say. So I try to stagger my week to allow for sprinting. I try to get a couple days in a row in where one day is a little bit lighter sort of just going through the motions, and then that next day is intense, or the vice versa. That first day that I sprint, I go hard, and then the next day I do tempo or just go through the motions with something like, 50-meter sprints on grass at 85%, just to stay in that pattern of movement. I focus on, things depending on the time of the year. So if it's earlier in the year like now, I might show up to practice to sprint and be a little sore from lifting because I'm trying to work on my, split leg strength or something like that. Later in the year, strength is going to be, way down the list, and sprinting is going to be the number one priority. So I just look at, in a 10-day period, 7-day period, 20-day period, how many times did I do speed? How many times was I sprinting from a crouched stance? Because I think crouched stances predispose you to injury. So I try to think of all the things I need to accomplish in a given period of time, what I've already done, and how that relates to my physical state, and then that leads me to what I need to do on a given day. Like today, didn't feel good accelerating, didn't really want to go do speed endurance, so I did some fly 30s. Did them at like 95% because my hips were a little tight from some lifting I did the other day. That's an example. I know that's not very specific, but that's kind of the idea. 500-meter workout early. I don't know, man. I just don't think 500s are very relevant to the 200-meter sprinter. If it's a tempo workout, maybe, that's fine. If it's on grass and you're going at like 60% effort, yeah, 500's probably fine. But doing like 500 meters all out, that's going to just wreck you, and it's not similar. Fine with the tempo work, the low intensity work, but not for the high intensity work. I'd probably not go over 300 or 400 meters for special endurance for a 200-meter sprinter. Yeah, Mason, glad to help. And I think you might even benefit from, not being able to do speed for a while, even though it sucks and you want to work on it all year. It does allow you to focus on some other things for a while and put your energy there. Favorite 3 eccentric exercises for posterior chain. All right, let's see. I do like the single leg back extension just because it really uses the muscles of the low back to stabilize the spine and the pelvis while the hamstring is lengthening. And you can play around with how you're positioning your foot on the back extension setup, so you're getting that full connection from like your big toe all the way up into the glutes. So that's a good one. I recently came up with, I came up with an exercise. I can't say it's my favorite, but it's just something to think about where like, no, I'm going to leave that for another video actually. Another one that I think is simple and easy to do is the 2 up, 1 down. 2 up, 1 down hamstring curl. So you get into a prone hamstring curl machine where you're laying on your stomach. You use both your legs to go up, so you're doing a 2-leg hamstring curl on the way up, but then you only do 1 leg going down. So that way you're focusing on that eccentric on the way down on 1 leg, and then you can fire up nice and fast with both legs. So you're not neglecting concentric or eccentric, you're kind of combining the two. Last one, I would say doing a toe elevated calf raise where you're letting your heel drop. As you focus on the eccentric of your heel dropping, that'll light up the popliteus behind the knee, upper calves, and all that. That's some good stuff. Yeah, I'll send you some videos, David. Let's see. Throat's getting a little parched over here, so we'll see how much longer I can go. Puffs, dude. You're really causing problems over here, man. Come here. How do you feel about sprinting with a weight vest? I like it. Just depends on how you use it, If you go too heavy, I think it kind of screws everything up, but I do think that it's a good way to change up the stimulus a bit. Sometimes it gets boring just going out and sprinting all the time. A weight vest, and I don't mean boring necessarily that I am personally bored, but like my body gets bored and stops wanting to adapt. So the weight vest is a good way to increase the the necessity to produce vertical force. So if someone's struggling with bouncing, for example, and they can't quite get up into the air, maybe they could use a weight vest. The other thing a weight vest will do is, because it's pulling you down to the ground more, because gravity's working on you in a more intense way, it will force you to spin your wheels faster. So if you're struggling with frequency and stride frequency, a moderate load weight vest can help. Trying to specifically improve my first step and standing vertical. General strength is good. Try something like a triphasic program for that. If you want a good vertical, triphasic works well. If you just get strong at squatting and then you incorporate some power-oriented lifts, that should help your vertical and your first step. The vertical, it's just a counter movement. So think of what else is a counter movement? A squat. So load up the squat, and then over time deload it, move it faster, combine that with some jumps, things like that. Notice better results from a weight vest versus sled pull and acceleration with top. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for wearing the resistance compared to pulling something that's an environmental constraint. If you pull a sled, that thing could be bouncing around behind you. You're dependent on the friction coefficient of the ground and the sled. It's hard to lug weights around. It's kind of a pain in the ass, really. Plus, what is the biggest force we have to overcome? Gravity. What's a weight vest gonna, increase? The effect of gravity on your body. So I do think a weight vest can be useful. What's best? Long stride? Natural strides. But you should be running as quick as you can, given that the movements you're making are a full range of motion, that you're properly executing that full range of motion. How to improve block start acceleration? Let's see, where'd that question go? Scroll down too far. You have good top speed and bad start. Definitely look at the position of your blocks, and then for the first step, split squats, low and high box step ups, things that are targeting the knee joint, that'll really help your first step. Once you're out of the first step, maybe the second, third step, as you sort of get better at it, that's when you just sort of get into sprinting and do the things that we talked about earlier in this video. So I don't necessarily know that you have to focus on it much more than, getting stronger in the right positions. And that's why I say split squats or variations of a split squat or variations of a step up. That'll help your first step. Once you have a good first step, you'll probably find it a lot easier to come out of that and progress into the rest of the sprint. Got cat hair in my nose now. Damn. What do you think? Why do you think crouch starts lend themselves more to injury? I've experienced quad tendonitis when doing a lot of them. I think it's because you're going from a position where it's a static position. Your muscles are they have a certain amount of tension. They're working, they're holding you there. And then all of a sudden, boom, they have to open up. They have to move quickly. They have to, they go from like no movement, isometric, just holding, to aggressive, fast, concentric, eccentric. And I think that change of dynamic from static to dynamic causes, or predisposes you to injury if you're doing too much of that work. Now, quad tendonitis, it makes sense because when you're in a crouch position and you're coming out of that crouch start, what are you using a lot of? Your quads. So specifically there. I've noticed it in the hip flexors. My hip flexors have a tendency to get worn out if I do too many crouch starts. So I think it mainly has to do with the ranges of motion and the drastic change in range of motion and velocity that you see. Whereas when you're in top speed sprinting, I think the range of motion, even though it's going to be full or whatever, it's just different because you're upright, you're more in a more balanced position, and I just think it's less intense on the tissues around your hips, especially. 400 meters cardio. It depends what you call cardio. I think doing repeat 200s, repeat 400s, that's cardio in my mind. So I would definitely do that stuff for sure. bodyweight circuits, med ball circuits. That's all great. Who do you think's biomechanically better, Noah Lyles or Andre DeGrasse? I like Noah Lyles as sprinting. Andre DeGrasse definitely is fast. I think he kind of biases toward that long arm, long leg behind him type of thing. Maybe that was just when he was at Altus, but I do think Noah Lyles generally looks a little bit better, at least at top speed. But they're both great, How to manage running intensity in the week. How many days a week do you run at the track? I try to get 3 days in, sometimes 4, but sometimes I can only get 2. Storms are kicking in. I go either medium intensity, high intensity, or high intensity, low intensity. So you can either ease into the faster day with an easier day before, but sort of moderate, or you could hit it hard day 1, then go low intensity the next day. Wouldn't really suggest you sprinting 3 days in a row unless you're mixing in endurance and speed work. I don't do time predictions. But Joshua Gonzalez, do you run 11.6 in the 60 or do you run 11.6 in the 100? Because if you run 11.6 in the 60, then I don't know. But if you run 11.6 in the 100, I don't know, you probably run 7.2, 7.3, I don't know, something like that. My torn calf is now healed enough so I can sprint 4x200 tempo. Do you think it's safe to try max speed in 2 weeks? No. Nah. You should only be working on max speed once you could do 10x50 at 80%. If you do 10x50 at 80%, then you can start doing something like fly 20s at 90%. It's not true max speed, but you're doing the max speed workout, and then over time you can increase. But it takes a lot longer to go from 95% to 100% than it does to go from 70% to 95%. So it's very important you don't rush that peak velocity, that fastest you'll ever run. It's important you don't rush that part of the recovery process. What are some ways to get rid of shin splints? Eccentric strength training of the calves, strengthening your feet, massaging your feet. Big thing is to watch when your foot is coming toward the ground and it's about to strike the ground, right? You want it to sort of arc down and back, or at least just set straight down onto the ground. If as your foot approaches the ground, it moves forward, okay? The 100-meter finish is over that way, right? As your foot moves forward and hits the ground, it crashes into the ground. That'll smash your shins, give you shin splints almost every time if you're doing that regularly. It'll happen in your drills, it'll happen when you jog, it'll happen when you sprint. So if this is happening, you have to make sure that you're paying attention and working on this at all speeds. Even when you walk, focus on bringing that foot down and back to the ground. Let that leg get in front of you and bring it down and back to the ground. These things, I think, over time can help with shin splints. I used to get shin splints. I don't anymore. Biggest change I made was paying attention to how my foot is approaching and meeting the ground. Also, if you're doing too much over distance training or too much speed work back to back to back, yeah, you could fry your lower leg and have issues there too. Yeah, guys, I'll definitely leave the live stream up. So don't worry, you can go back, and if you got to go or whatever, don't feel like you got to stay and watch it, but you can come back and watch it later. I think swimming would not be bad cross training as long as you're not going crazy with the duration of work. Say you do 30-second, 60-second repeats in the pool, or you just wade and you kind of hang out and then you relax and you wade again. I think that's great low intensity stimulus for the body. I had a birthday a couple weeks ago and my family surprised me and came out, and so I was in the pool, and I suck at swimming. I would probably die if I had to save myself via swimming in some intense situation. But I did get out there. I did wade around, do a little swimming. And I did notice my hamstrings, they got pretty worked. It was low intensity work, but hey, they were working. My adductors were working just to hang out in the pool. So I don't think swimming is bad. Like I said, focus on the duration of the work. and make sure that the amount of time you're spending doing, very long efforts in the pool, say minutes of work, balance that with the rest of your training. Because if you do too much of that slow, long duration work, you will see changes in your physical body, and that can detract from your ability to sprint. But, it's all about your goals. If you just sprint for fun, then definitely do it, If you're sprinting competitively, that's where you have to be a little bit more careful. Does open hands make your arm a longer lever, making your arm swing slower? Or does open or closed have no effect? Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is something to be said for if you tense your hand like this, sort of like how when you tense the foot, you kind of get a certain feeling through the rest of the leg. Some people might find that this is great. I like to just keep my hand like this, so I like the shorter lever approach, because this is easier for me to stay relaxed. I can feel like my fingers touching my hand, but I'm not squeezing. I'm just here. And that allows me to stay relaxed, I think. It's sort of the squeeze the chip idea, where if you put a potato chip between your fingers and you ran with it, you wouldn't want to break the chip, because if you broke the chip, you were too tense. If you do this, I think sometimes it can predispose you to being too tense. If you do a fist, it'll make you too tense. I wouldn't worry about the long lever thing as much. There's much more to be gained from ensuring your arm is not too long of a lever than from the hand, but hey, it's a good point. Tempo 70%, 10 by 200. Yeah, that's a great tempo workout for sure. What are your times? I ran 10:66 in the 100. In college, I ran 6:91 in the 60, but last season, or I guess technically this year, at practice with a free lap timer, I ran 6:77 and 6:83. On a Brower, I ran 6:79 also. Yeah, man, definitely don't rush your recovery. Your time is 11:38, but I have very low knee height. Very low knee height. You're probably skewed to the backside, so you're probably trying to push behind you, okay? So don't try to just push the ground away from you behind you, Luke. You want to feel like you're picking your foot up and setting it back down. That would be the first thing I would try. It's not that you're trying to drive your knee really high. It's that you're trying to compress the leg like a spring up under you, so then it can swing forward and then move back down to the ground. Pull that foot up off the ground. Don't try to push behind you. Okay, just pick that foot up real quick. See if that makes a difference. If you still have issues, I would do some basic hip flexor training, like on a cable machine, or even without a cable machine, just lay on a bench with your legs off of it and kind of cycle your legs so you're getting your hip flexors and your lower abs working. Don't worry too much about knee height in general, or I should say, in and of itself. Consider how the height of your knee or where your hip flexion gets to is relative to the rest of the leg cycle, because if you're skewed to the backside too much, you will always have low knees, and trying to have higher knees won't do anything to fix that. What will fix it is making sure you get your foot off the ground sooner and you initiate that forward swing of the leg sooner. That'll help. But like I said, don't worry about knee height too much. Just, make sure your leg cycle is balanced. Sounds good, Ethan. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate the birthday wishes. Catch you next time. Do you think it's possible to drop 0.3 seconds in the 60 meter in a year for high-level athletes? Oh, that's tough, man. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not possible, but is it likely? Is it likely to happen? I would say it's tough. But if that's your goal, then go for it. Don't let me tell you, not to do it. Don't tempt me with a good time. What are half Bosu squats good for? I don't know, man. You tell me. I think for like the guy who was asking about balance, maybe he could do that for some of his training. I think something like a Bosu squat is great on a low intensity day. Maybe you could throw it into a circuit, Are track spikes necessary for a non-competition athlete who enjoys sprint training? No, definitely not. I do think that spikes can give you a different feel, and sometimes that feel is better. But if you're new to sprinting, then I think going for the softer surfaces, softer footwear is probably a good place to start. You know, find some good grass that you can use. Maybe you go barefoot there and you see how that feels. And then you put your shoes back on, you see how that feels. Only get spikes if you really want to. If you do get spikes and you're a non-competition athlete and you just enjoy sprint training, which I think many people should do if they like it, you don't have to compete to be a sprinter, you know, is get the shoes or get the spikes that are sort of the entry-level spikes, because they're going to have a more flexible plate. And then over time you can progress to the stiffer plate, but don't go for the most expensive, stiffest plate that you could get right out the gate, because you know, you're setting yourself up to maybe get shin splints or something like that if you go from something like running shoes, which are soft, and then go right into the stiffest spike plate you could get. That's probably not going to feel that great. Let's see. Take a sip of water here. "18 years old, 1074, 2140. Nice. Can you reach 20s, 10.5? Yeah, you can. I wouldn't limit yourself to just this 1 year, though, Yusuf. You know, just consider over the next few years, you probably want to aim for that. But yeah, I'm sure you can. I have 5 months to get as fast as possible. How can I do it? Buy my program. You could, well, it depends what you've been doing, I guess, you know. I'd be doing a lot of flying sprints, you know, not a lot in any given session, but I would be doing them frequently enough. You know, every week you should be doing some. I would avoid a lot of over distance work. I'd get stronger in the first couple months, transition to power in kind of that third into the fourth month. From the fourth month on, really start deloading your strength training, focusing on velocity, and not going overboard with the volume, not going overboard with your over distance training. Probably your best bet to get faster in 5 months. The caveat is that what you do to get faster in 5 months may not be the thing that will lead you to being the fastest in 5 years. So you have to consider what's more important to you, getting fast for this upcoming thing, or, you know, progressing over the longer term. Keep pulling your groin, Dennis. Oh, that sucks. I hear you there. I did that a few weeks ago. Any tips? Well, don't try to be too quick, because if you try to be too quick, generally that will lead to coordination getting off within the muscles. Things get tense and something gets pulled. The other thing is I would look at how you can incorporate extreme ranges of motion into your training. So say you get a high box, like a 24-inch box. You could put a bar on your back, given that your groin feels okay. Put a bar on your back, step up onto that box, so you're getting into a very high position. In fact, I think I have a video here, but it wasn't working to bring it up before. Let's see. Let me search for something real quick, all right? But basically, you want to get into a position where you're exposing your groin and the muscles of the groin to a range of motion in which you are more likely to get hurt when you're sprinting. And we want to load that very slowly. We want to be just sort of hanging out in an isometric, exposing yourself to that range of motion. And over time, I think that can help lead to feeling better. So here, I got the video right here. So here's one of them. Let's see. Is this the right one? Yeah. So this is an example of like the videos that are attached to my programs. Oh, we're on the slow motion here. It's going to look weird. So you see, I'm getting into an extreme range of motion here. The hip is very extended. The other hip is very flexed. The knee is very flexed. My torso's forward. So you can see how there's a lot of pressure going into the groin, right? Let me move myself over. If you look at my foot, my foot, I'm up on my toes, so that's also going to help create a lot of tension in this leg that's down. So that's one of the exercises that I would start incorporating into your training just at the very start. Like, you just kind of hang out here, right? Just hang out, and then eventually you'll start to feel like, okay, that's enough. Lean back. That's a little eccentric on the hamstring right there. And then get back into it, and you can alternate. Now, progressing from there, I would say you'd want to get into something like this. So here, damn it, we're still in the slow motion, aren't we? All right, so you get into that sort of extreme position. It's not quite the same, but you get the point. You get into that high box position, push up from there. That actually wasn't the video that I was trying to show, but that's, you know, it's within the same progression. So, but here is another one for those of you who have problems with hip flexors or groins. Where are we? All right, this one's kind of weird, but I still like it. So here I have a dumbbell sitting behind my neck, and I'm standing on one leg, and I'm leaning back, trying to bend at the knee. You'll feel a lot of stretch in the quad, in the hip flexors, in the lower abs. And I think that connection of the quads, hip flexors, lower abs, all of that plays a role in whether or not you're hurting your groin. So that's another thing. One more thing I'm going to show on this topic, just since we're already here, and, you know, I don't know, the next time we'll talk about this stuff. But this is extremely simple, but I think it's important. All right, so I'm standing up, I'm leaning into this, and the foot that's on the ground, you see how I'm letting my foot kind of roll over. Let's see. I'm making sure I'm getting like as much range of motion there as I can. And that's what I mean by exposing yourself to sort of extreme ranges of motion. Is you don't want to do it at a high velocity or with an extreme load, but you do want to get some load and expose yourself to that range of motion, because usually when you're hurting your groin or your hip flexors, it's at an extreme range of motion. I think I beat that horse to death now. Is front squat good? Not bad. Let's see. Yusuf, that's good for it's good for speed endurance, but I would say like I'd probably want to keep the 80s and the 100s on one day and the 150s and 120s on another day. Or 120s with the 80s, but once you get up to 150, that's almost twice the distance of an 80. I think they're different, you know? It's not that you can't ever do them together. It's just you might benefit from sometimes splitting them up. One leg exercise is best for groin rehab. I think split leg exercises are, because usually when you're hurting your groin, it's not simply that your hip is extended, but it's that your hip is extended while the other hip is flexed and the other knee is extended. So, you know, it's getting that splitting of the legs and finding, you know, it doesn't have to be that your foot is perfectly straight. It may be that you want to get up on the box, let your foot turn out, and that gets you the maximum amount of tension through the leg and through the groin or the area that's hurt. So one leg, unilateral, split leg, that whole world of exercises I think is really good for groin rehab, and I think it's the way to go. Following up on the 5-month thing the other guy asked, he said you would take a different approach if you had 5 years. What would that approach be exactly? So I would focus on that first year. I'd still, you know, progress through from the general training to the specific training. It's just that if you have a little bit more time in your first year to work on things in the 85, 90% range. Maybe you're getting into a little bit more tempo endurance that year. That might set you up to have a better foundation, including having maybe more general strength work. Spending a year doing that stuff and still progressing to specific work when it comes time to compete. But, if we think of the general theme of that year, it could be more general, and over time you can progress more and more specific. Sometimes if you ramp up specificity, ramp up intensity really quickly, you burn yourself out and you run out of gas. So it's sort of just considering like, okay, what do I really want to achieve? When do I want to achieve it? And can I progress in the longer term in a way that incorporates maybe the full range of work that I want to include, whereas in 5 months, I'm going to have to neglect some stuff most likely. Or if I really do everything, I can only do each thing for a very short period of time, right? So if we want to be able to do all the things we need to do to perform the best, you need a certain amount of time spent on each individual thing. And therefore, if you have more than 5 months to train, you can you can certainly get more work in, but you can spend more time on each individual part of that work. Explosive. I mean, sub 10's hard, man. You can go sub 11. I'm not going to say you can't go sub 10. I think there's probably a lot of people who can who never did, Some of the best athletes are out walking the streets. Don't give up. That's my thing. If you're 13 and you're running pretty well, just keep at it. Don't set expectations for yourself. Don't get caught up in the, I identify as a sprinter. Just go do the work, enjoy what you're doing, and have fun. And realize that, at the end of the day, if you're enjoying what you're doing, that's what matters most. If you're not enjoying it, then why are you doing it, Hill sprints, I'd say they're good for early year acceleration training. That's that. Exercises for knee drive. Like I said earlier, don't worry about the knee drive so much as where your leg cycle is skewed. If you look at like the whole arc of your leg cycle and it looks like this, or looks like this relative to your body, or it looks like this, that's going to tell you something. So if your leg cycle is all skewed to the backside, your heel comes really high behind your body, it doesn't come high and tight under your body, but it comes high behind your body, that's going to predispose you to not getting very high knee lift. So you got to look at stuff like that, make sure you're not over pushing, and work on just picking your foot up right under you. That might be a good thing to do. Pool and sand training, it's good for general days, If you're going to do a circuit, well, do the circuit in the pool. Do the circuit on the sand. It's completely non-specific training, but we need non-specific training. So if you like the pool, if you like the exercise you could do in the pool, it's probably a good exercise to jump as high as you can out of a pool, or load up and push yourself through the water, in one explosive push. That's probably not a bad idea. Or if you're just doing general work, pool or sand can be great. I wouldn't say the hill sprints are good for increasing speed in and of itself, but it's like good basic fundamental training, Got to run a 40 on December 4th. How do you prepare? Go run some 40s. Because at this point, there's not much else to do, I'd spend some time working on your start. The rest of the time, I'd be doing 30s, 40s, and 50s. That's all you need to do at this point. If it was next December, it'd be different. But right now, just do the very specific work that you need to do. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I agree about that Walter Dix thing. Totally. You don't give an elephant plyometrics, and you don't make a gazelle a power lifter. So look at the athlete, look at the shape of the muscles, the fascia, look at how thick they are versus how lanky they are, and ask them, do you like to lift? No. Well, that tells you a lot of what you need to know of how you need to train them. You know, if someone hates lifting and they feel horrible after, who are we to say that they need to do it? You know, yeah, they should probably do some like basic stuff, like the general training or some hamstring work or whatever, but they shouldn't be out there just grinding away with, you know, heavy ass lifts if they hate it. Just like you probably shouldn't take someone who weighs 250 pounds and is 5'5" and have them run fly 30s and do depth jumps. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, right? So yeah, Shalon Adkins, you're right on point with all that. I don't necessarily agree that they don't enjoy their training. I think a lot of people enjoy their training, but yeah, they enjoy success. But you know, if you hated every day of the last 10 years you spent training to win a medal or to win a race or something like that, is that success? Maybe. I don't know. Being rich and famous is fun, but if you're an asshole, then nobody wants to hang out with you and you don't have anybody to have fun with that money with. So it's sort of related to that idea. Karsten Warholm. I don't know much about him, honestly. Let's see. How hard is sub 11 really? I recently started doing sprints, running low 12s. Seeing 5'2" women run it makes me think it's possible. Yeah, dude, exactly. But I think a lot of people, you know, screw themselves in the head to where they never do it for a number of reasons. Also, I mean, those women are extremely gifted, you know, like as far as their athleticism. But you make a fantastic point. And yeah, I think more people can run. I think more people can run under 11 seconds. Far more people can run under 11 seconds than we have seen run under 11 seconds, for sure. And yeah, running faster than women motivates me to keep training. It's true, man. How does a finesse sprinter train? It's just more sprinting, you know. It's, you know, they might do more intensive tempo. They might do more speed endurance work. They might do more sessions where they're going through the motions at 90%, and then, you know, I don't know. I just think it's less strength training. So not that much changes. It's just if you are strength training and sprint training at the same time, you have to give up some room somewhere. You can't just do 100% here and 100% there. You have to balance them out. Well, if you're only sprinting and doing like core work and then some maybe general body weight circuits and stuff on the side, you can put in more volume as a finesse sprinter. And if you weigh less, you can probably also endure more volume because you're not just smashing the ground with, you know, 250 pounds every time. So they are better set up for success with a higher volume program. I'm not saying they need to do a high volume program, but a higher volume program than the power sprinter may be in the cards. They might do more speed endurance work than they do block starts, or they might do more flying sprints than they do block starts. That type of thing. Yeah, nobody enjoys puking. Although I would say, I don't know. I'm not a big advocate of pushing people to puke. I definitely have, and I've puked, but I don't know. Yeah, Ben Johnson was ridiculously strong. Even with steroids, like the average person jumping on juice would never get as strong as Ben Johnson was. That was his gift, was how strong he could get. And also his gift was being able to combine that with being able to move well enough, you know, to run fast. Are most finesse runners Asian? I don't know about that. It might be, but I don't know. I don't know that we can draw such conclusions very easily. Other exercises for hamstrings. Well, I mean, I mentioned some earlier. RDLs. Sprinting's a great hamstring exercise. 2 leg up, 1 leg down hamstring curl. Jose, I ran 1066. I've run it a couple times. So maybe this year I'll run 10.5 or 10.4. We'll see. I enjoy sprinting a ton. Just not the part after. Yeah, being stiff is not fun, but it tells you you did something right. Let's see, discount. Um, if you type in YouTube, you get a discount. But I can make one that is a live stream discount. So if you just type in live stream, you get it. But I'd type the YouTube in one now in case I forget. Just started sprinting. 26-year-old. Competition will begin in January. Train for specific competitions or just work on the foundation. I would still, formulate your training in a way. Well, Dennis, if you just started, it wouldn't be bad to go do a competition just to see where you're at. But I would set the expectation in your head that it will take at least a year to really start to see real results. So you can definitely compete, in January of this year, but understand that it will take time for you to get to the point where you're reaching what you're capable of. What you sprint in January is probably not what you'll sprint January a year from now. So just manage that within yourself, within your own, mental and emotional state, that you're not setting high expectations. You just want to see where you're at, and you want to see maybe what you need to work on or how it feels to be in that environment. Let that be how you approach competition this year when you're just getting started. Not setting the expectation, I have to run this time and that's going to determine whether I can continue on or not. That's a bunch of bullshit. Just, look at it as an opportunity to see where you're at and give you information that you can then benefit from and progress from going forward. And I think that'll be a great way to go. Key to training to increase speed at 48 years old. That's a tough one, man. I'm not saying it's impossible. You definitely can. But I would say you're probably going to have to really manage body composition, because as we get older, we hold more fat, and that's going to predispose you to more injury if you're hitting the ground, with a high body weight and you don't have the strength to back it up, So managing body composition is important. Recovery is huge. You have to sleep a lot, and the quality of your sleep needs to be high. Other than that, it's no different. It's just managing workloads and understanding that you're going to need a longer warm-up. You're going to need, maybe more mobility work. All of that assistance work is going to be more important as you age. What makes skinny sprinters so fast? They have less weight to pull around the track. So gravity has a weaker effect on them relative to heavier sprinters. That was a good follow-up question. Need to get sprinting again. Yes. Opinion on isometrics. The exercise I posted just a little while ago on that high box iso hold, I guess that's an isometric, right? I don't like hamstring isometrics, like where you sit in the glute ham raise machine and just hold yourself there. Word on the street is that how can I put this? Groups who have popularized isometric hamstring training have also experienced high rates of hamstring injury in the time frame that they used isometric hamstring training. Whatever you make of that is for you to, figure out yourself, but I would not focus a lot on isometrics on the hamstrings. I think isometrics in general can be great. I like to sit in a lunge and, let my hips open up or do things like that, but I like isometrics for the calves, for the feet. Hamstrings, not the isometrics in the typical sense. You could do it to where maybe you have a cable hooked up to your ankle or your foot, and you bring your leg from like the high knee, front side position down under you. It can be an isometric if the majority of the motion of that is coming from the glute, and then the knee joint isn't really moving much. It's just the leg is kind of coming down as sort of one rigid thing. That could be sort of an isometric in some of the muscles of the leg, I guess, for the hamstrings. But like I said, I don't think they're great for the hamstrings. For the hip flexors, like I said, do that like high box hold that I showed you. That's good for mobility. Stuff like that is probably good to try. But we're all learning here, right? So, yeah, Ben Johnson definitely had the best start. Like, be hard to see it replicated. Bing Chan, he changed his starting leg recently, which I thought was interesting. Yusuf, I would keep the tempo work in through maybe January. You could keep it throughout into your competition season, but it's just a matter of how much you're doing and when you're doing it. You could do it on a day where you feel like, not really sure what to do. Throw it in on that day. I want to run, but I don't want to run fast. I don't feel that great. You could do tempo on that day. But don't, like, hyper-focus on it, Damn, it's already 4? We've been here for 2 hours? Jeez. All right. We're going to have to land the plane soon, guys. My throat is about to fall out from all this talking. I'm somewhat introverted, so I don't always talk for this long, Yeah, see? There's definitely hope for those who are not 20 years old to run faster. It's just how you progress it. What do you think about NFL athletes' speed? Field speed and track speed are definitely different. I think with football players, soccer players, they tend to run lower to the ground, meaning, or I should say, their hips are low to the ground because think about what they have to do. They have to cut, they have to change directions, they have to be ready to take someone on. So generally, field sport athletes will run a little bit lower, and I think that's one reason why they get more hamstring and adductor injuries is because if you're lower, you tend to be in a position that lengthens the hamstrings or the psoas or the adductors more so, especially if you're cutting and changing direction. So when you see someone who runs, 10-2 and they're on the field and they're outrunning everybody, those other guys are still fast. It's just they have to be fast within the context of being, plowed by a 250-pound linebacker and being able to, handle that situation. So there's probably a lot of people who are in football who could run faster had they never played football and only ran track because the demands that they were facing every day would predispose them to running faster rather than in football. They're predisposing you to be in certain positions and prepared for certain things that predispose you to not running as fast because they're less efficient positions for running fast, but they're more efficient positions for changing direction or something like that. Plyometrics can help ground contact, yeah, if they improve your stiffness or your ability to get off the ground. But it depends on what you use, If you're doing an alternate leg bound with a med ball where you're on the ground for 250 milliseconds, probably not going to help your ground contact times as much as a very quick, very stiff pogo hop. Maybe it would, but that's just my thought process. Let's see. Hypothetical training program for longevity approach. So for the longevity approach, minimize your maximal effort strength training. Be very conscious of when you go fast. So don't force yourself to go fast every day or even every week, Just like don't force yourself to go heavy every day or every week. Maybe in the gym you're focusing on that 60-70% range most of the time. On the track, have some fast days, you have some slower days, and you have some just complete off days. If you want to go for longevity, you have to manage the very intense days as well as not going on too much volume where you're running 2,000 meters every day. That's also going to wear you down. No, I'm not extremely relaxed when I sprint, but that's why I work on it. And that's why I preach it, because I know what it's like to be on the other side of it. And I'm a lot more relaxed now when I sprint than I was before, so I see the benefit, and therefore I proselytize about it. Yeah, Tyreek is fast. He also got that right hook, if you know what I mean. Yeah, the Metro and Collins skinnier. Collins, he did a good job of explaining the idea of not going hard every day. He got interviewed and was like, you know, how did I get here? How did I run fast for so long? I just had a more relaxed approach to my training, you know. He didn't hammer it every day going 100% effort. He went fast when he could, and he didn't when he couldn't, you know. It's logical, it makes sense, but sometimes we step outside of that and overthink things, right? Speed bands, what are they good for? You know, as with any tool, there's something you could gain from it probably. Good for some hip flexor training, or maybe good to use in your warm-up, helps you warm up your leg muscles better, things like that. With any given tool, I think they get overhyped just because of marketing, you know. People like to sell stuff. But they're not bad by any means. They're just not, like, magic either. I like triphasic training. Triphasic was sort of like the foundation of my strength training approach for a long time. It's kind of where I started, you know. So I would definitely say if you're new to training and you're new to strength training and you want to get strong, that's a great way to do it. The only thing with triphasic is it's all based on stress, like how much stress you can impose on the body. So you can only use it effectively if you have control of your whole program. You know, if you're running track under someone else's program and then you're adding triphasic onto that, you might get burnt out. So you have to manage that, and don't go overboard on the accessory work. I did. My friend David, who was in here earlier, we were going very hard on the triphasic work, and we got strong as shit. But I also would like go home after working out, and I would sit down to eat food, and I wouldn't be able to eat because I was just too burnt out. Like I didn't even want to eat. When you don't want to eat because you're so burnt out, that's a sign that, hey, maybe you've gone too far. But, you know, that was 8 years ago. So I guess it takes some time to learn such things, right? So you can take it for what it's worth. But I do think triphasic training is great. Just understand the stress aspect and how you can manage that. Oh, let's see. Ran out of water too, so I'm really going to have to go soon. All right. I think these will be the last questions, guys. But we will do another one of these soon, and maybe we can make it a regular thing if everybody likes it. It's cool to interact, and, you know, you guys have direct questions, so this is probably the best way I can help you find your way in all this is by answering your questions. Thoughts on Noah Lyles? Yeah, Noah Lyles is a great athlete. I wouldn't say his start is bad, just like Usain Bolt's start isn't bad. You know, he would probably start faster than most other people out there, but on the elite stage, when he's next to Coleman makes his start look bad for sure. I think Noah Lyles has the most potential of any, you know, well-known sprinter at the moment to continue to improve and give Bolt a run for his money on those records. Not saying he's going to break them, but I don't see anybody else who's at least got a chance in the 200 at the moment, you know. Maybe there's someone I haven't heard of, you know. But as far as people that I know, Noah Lyles is kind of, he's on top right now, I think, potential-wise. How do people like Lemaitre, Lyles, and Bolt get such high top speed and speed endurance? Hey, kitty. What, man? It helps that his legs are very long while also having, you know, fast twitch muscle and growing up in a place where he had the right training environment, he had the right people around him, he had coaches who saw his potential, a lot of factors, but these guys are lanky, They're not overweight. What's up, dude? And they are genetically really gifted. So they have a magical combination, you know. 5'9", great form, medium muscular build with technique. Oh, what technique can make me perform better? Watch the first 20-30 minutes of this video and then see if you still have that question, Elton. Do quarter front squat help sprint-ons like quarter back squat? I think quarter squat front versus back are probably going to be similar in their effect. The banded tights, that's interesting. Check out Exogen also. They have weighted pants and they have a weighted vest, arm straps, or arm sleeves and stuff too. I got the shorts and the calf sleeves. Exogen, Lila, L-I-L-A, Exogen, E-X-O-G-E-N. If you're looking for wearable resistance like the K-bands, this is a different way to achieve that. They're expensive, but I think they're a very unique way to load. So it's worth checking out. Oh yeah, his Tyson's turnover rate was insane. His 968 or 969 American record, I think it was, in Shanghai. That was just insane, his turnover. I mean, it's crazy. Thanks, Yohan. I'm glad I'm doing YouTube too. Maybe someday it can be my full-time job. That'd be nice. From Croatia, one of my best friends is from Croatia, Dario Horvat. He holds your national record. Oh, hey, look. You mentioned him. Nice. You were one step ahead of me. I am a pro soccer player, sometimes trained with a great prospect from Croatia. He always told me about Horvat, how he was amazing before big injury. I see that you train with him. Yeah, he was my roommate in college. Texted him earlier today. One of my best friends. Great guy, funny guy, fastest white dude I ever knew. You know, he was legit. It was really quite a shame that he got injured, and that's a whole nother story. We could, not his story specifically, but my college experience, training, and all that. We could talk about it sometime. It's starting to rain. Tyson to me had like the best turnover rate. Yeah, it was crazy, just unheard of. What are your thoughts on Yohan Blake? I think he's kind of over the hump at this point, you know. I don't mean to say that he will never PR again, but that period of time was very unique in that, think of who he was training with. Think of the energy surrounding all of that. Plus, he was younger. Plus, I think they were taking oxylifrin, which is a stimulant. I'm not saying it helped him a lot, but, you know, there's a lot of factors involved. I think the biggest factor was that he was training with Usain Bolt, Warren Weir, you know, those guys. The energy in track was high. It's hard to beat that, especially as you get older, you know. So he can come back, and he has been competing, but I don't know that we're going to see him run 19.2 again, you know. I think the weighted pants versus bands are just different. So with a band, you're getting progressive resistance. So as you increase the tension on the band, the resistance is greater. So you're getting the least amount of stimulus at the, say if you're doing hip flexion, like driving the knee up with bands, you're getting the least amount of resistance at the bottom and the most at the top. Straight weight is going to be different. It's going to be the opposite, where as you accelerate your limb, or as you accelerate the load on which the limb is, you know, on, you're going to have a decreasing stimulus as you accelerate that load. Just like as you push a shot put, like I mentioned earlier, and you push it and you're accelerating it, you know, eventually that's like sort of becoming lighter, so to speak. So it's not the best analogy, but if you're squatting and you push up in a squat and the bar starts to lift off your back, you are no longer bearing that load. With a band, it's increasing as you stand up, so you're going to have more and more load. So it's not that the band versus the weight is better, they're different. So if you're looking at a specific joint movement or a specific, you know, thing you're targeting, you have to think, where do I need the resistance? Do I need it at the bottom of the movement, top? Does it need to be consistent the whole way? and that can help you decide whether you want to use bands or straight weight. That'll help narrow it down for you. For setting up your week, if you're racing Friday, Saturday, I'd probably do something like Monday and Wednesday or Monday and Tuesday with a low day somewhere in the Monday through Wednesday period. Thursday is just a pre-meet, warm up, go through the motions, and then race. Really when you're competing in a week, you can't do a whole lot of training. And that's one thing about the competition season is the amount you compete, the frequency with which you compete is going to impact your training. So that's why you got to get your training done before, and then it's just time to peak. Peak age for sprinter, I don't know. It varies a lot because some people are just different as far as their biological age relative to their chronological age. Some people mature faster, but probably mid to late 20s for most, into the 30s nowadays. With PRP, stem cell treatment, all that stuff, if you have the money, you can stay healthy for a long time. And so I think we're going to see people perform better later in their career, just because of that. Not just that, but that general idea of technology and healthcare and all that stuff improving will probably lengthen people's careers. I got cat fights going on. All right, guys. I think we're going to call it here. It is 4:20, which is a perfect time to end the stream and move on to other things, we shall say. But I appreciate you guys watching and appreciate you hanging out with me for a couple hours. Hopefully you got something out of it. It was helpful for me to hear you guys' questions and all that. So definitely, if you haven't checked it out, I got some links up above me. My website where I got programs. I got a subscribe star. The whole thing with the subscribe star is I started a Discord channel. So if there's questions people want to ask me or they want to ask each other, maybe that can be a place that happens. I don't think anybody's signed up for it yet, but hey, eventually people might, and maybe it'll turn into something. Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff if you want. If not, don't worry. I'll catch you on here next time. I thank you guys for watching, spending time. If it weren't for all you, I would be here talking to the wall. So, while I am, giving information that I've learned over time that hopefully can help you, I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you guys. So, thank you guys very much. I will catch you next time. Cody Bidlow with SprintingWorkouts.com, signing off.